So Marshall just released their new factory modded Plexi and JCM 800 amps at NAMM 2025. If you ask me, roughly 15 years too late. But timing is not the only problem these amps have. Are they really worth it? Let's check it out. Let's go. Joey here. Before we get into these new Marshall amps, I want to plug my guitar courses real quick. If you like the song that you just heard, that style of playing is totally learnable. My Power Pentatonics course deals with all things minor pentatonics and how you can connect all these different minor pentatonic shapes all over the fretboard. It also teaches you tons of cool licks, slow and fast, and you can learn some killer stuff in that course. Also, it supports the channel, so if you want to do that, check the link in the description. So it seems like Marshall finally released the amps that we wanted 15 or 20 years ago. And in this video, I want to talk about why I think it's way too late for these amps. I also want to talk about why I think the features are totally underwhelming. And I want to talk about the price that I find absolutely ridiculous. Let me explain. So back in the 2000s, it was really trendy to play Mesa Boogie kind of amps. Every rock band had these 6L6 kind of amps, American sounding high gain machines. But towards the end of that decade, that trend pretty much faded away and everybody jumped back on the Marshall train. All of a sudden, the Marshall sound was all vogue again, and there was a market opening up and a demand for a modern sounding Marshall. Everybody wanted the Plexi sound, but with a couple modern adjustments like a tight bottom end, a good effects loop, and maybe some power scaling features. Basically, they wanted this kind of sound. The Friedman brown eye kind of sound. And that niche got covered super quickly, you know? Friedman came out with 5, 6, 7 different flavors of the perfect modded Plexi with all their models that they're offering. Bogner came out with the Goldfinger Zupelite and the Helios. Splon has the Quick Rod. Victory Amps in the UK comes out with 2 or 3 different Plexi models with modern features as well. So the market was very quick in adapting to that demand and that need from modern guitar players. And while all the brands I just mentioned were super successful during those years, Marshall pretty much stood at the sidelines, not having an eye on the market. And that's why I think this release is way too late, and I think they're overestimating the demand for that kind of amp because the market is super saturated. Over the past 15 years, whoever wanted that perfect Plexi with modern features kind of sound just went with one of these brands. The very minimalistic feature set of these amps is pretty much what makes them late to the party, because the amps, the way they are designed, are actually fine amps. Nothing against those things. I am a Marshall fan, I have a Marshall Silver Jubilee. The way they are built, totally fine. But the feature set is just, you know, not out of 2025. That's like a 2008 feature set. No power scaling to play the amp a little bit quieter. You don't have an effects loop on the Plexi, which is, you know, I don't know, asinine to think about. Now you might be arguing the Plexi never had an effects loop, why would it need one now? And I totally understand that. However, it's 2025, guys. Every guitar player pretty much plays time-based effects, reverb, delay, whatever else you have. And if you put that in front of a Plexi with a distorting power amp, not a good sound. There's also no low wattage mode, so I can't adjust the amp to the surroundings that I'm in. All the competitors have low wattage modes. Think of Friedman, think of Bogner. It's totally possible, just Marshall doesn't do it. And if I want to play a small stage, I have to fire up a 100-watt Marshall now? I'm not so sure about that. And then they could have thought of something like a reactive load or IR loader within the amp, because nowadays, I want to have an amp that does it all. It's loud enough on stage, but I want to record quiet with it as well. That's 2025. That's the demand a modern guitar player has when it comes to an amp. So we're basically talking about a modded Plexi at this point that is the same as in 1970, just with a couple gain mods. That's not really innovation, and that's not really catering to the modern player in 2025. Not at all. These amps basically give you the exact same thing that modders could give you in the 1980s. And this is a point where I have to say Fender does it way better. They do rely on their heritage, and they do have their vintage kind of amps that they never change, which is totally fine. But then they come up with new stuff. Think of the Fender Jack White signature amp, which is something completely new, 2 different speakers, new sounds. You can get creative. They're pushing the envelope, you know, and all Marshall has is their heritage. They're basically the Gibson of the amp world, I feel like. And that, to me, as a Silver Jubilee owner who loves Marshalls, who loves the old 1987 Marshall Silver Jubilee, this is just sad to see. I want this company to progress, and I want this company to come up with something that excites me. But coming up 15 years too late with a modded Plexi and a feature set that is pretty much a 1970 Plexi, no bells and whistles other than, what, like a tight knob and a structure switch? To me, that doesn't cut it. Which leads us to the price question, and this is where I think it gets really, really ridiculous. So I just checked it at Sweetwater. The modded Plexi is priced at $3,699. Coincidence or not, that's the same price as a Friedman BE50 Deluxe, which has low wattage mode, a good functioning effects loop, more different tone switches, probably a more effective EQ, and, you know, a couple channels more. Now you might be saying, okay, but I never wanted a Friedman, I want a Marshall, Joey. That's fine. The price is so ridiculous that even if you buy a used 1959 Plexi on Reverb and you have it modded by an amp tech who knows what he's doing, it's still gonna be cheaper than buying this one new. And if you're having an amp modded, they can mod it exactly like you want it. If you're buying this amp now, this modded Plexi, you're gonna have to take what they give you. So it's not cheaper than the competition. It's also not cheaper than buying an old Plexi and have it modded. So who is this amp really for? The only kind of audience I can think of who would love this amp is the diehard Marshall fans of the 80s and the 90s who want to have that old feeling of being young and playing a modded Marshall. People that for some reason can't jive with the Victory, Bogner, Friedman hype, you know. But young players won't buy this because A, they probably don't have the money, and if they do, they probably have these amps in the box anyway, like I do in my Fractal FM9. And amp players are probably already very well equipped with these kinds of amps, and they probably got it at a price point a couple of years ago when it was even cheaper than the original Marshall. Now, here's my opinion on this entire product release. What I think Marshall should have done is release the modded Plexi and the modded JCM 800 as 20-watt models. And they should have released the same amps as 20-watt models that can scale down to maybe 3 watts or 2 watts. Because then I guess you have a seller. Because maybe small enclosure, think about like small, nicely looking vintage enclosure that fits in every living room. 20 watts all the way down to 2 watts maybe. And the modded sounds of the JCM 800 and the Plexi. That to me is a seller. But if you're coming at me with a 100-watt Marshall that I can't turn down, actually I have to turn it up to get all that gain that I want? No. Hard pass for me. Let me know your opinions. Let me know your comments. I wish it was differently. I wish they excited me with a new product. Unfortunately, they didn't. Let me know what you're thinking about it. Are you ordering one? Are you going to look into one? Let me know. See you in the next video. I've been Joey. Bye-bye.